Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the kind invitation to present in this statistics conference. On behalf of Eric Strassner, we want to thank this kind of invitation. And I want to present to you what is doing the IMF in this topic. The presentation is named Challenges and Opportunities. The outline, I will speak about 4 topics: the digital revolution, how has economic activity changed, what are the measurement challenges that we are facing, how is the international statistical community responding, and what is doing the IMF in this regard. First, I have 3 examples about the impact of the digital revolution in our daily life. In the past, we can see that the way that a sport team was managed, and a team owner was supposed to pay to a scorekeeper to save the information about the development of the teams. Nowadays, we can see that these same teams are working in a different way. Now we have a team owner also, but behind a data scientist that is saving all the information and also is creating an asset. We can see applications as, that are a GPS tracker, recording all the information from the athletes and saving it in such a way that can be used for future developments of the teams. So in this way, we can say that currently, as has been mentioned before, the current SNA in the production, we don't have the data asset within the boundary of the production or even as an asset. So we need to move forward in this regard. Another example is the financial services. In the traditional way, we go to a bank and then we can present a check, and it is then they are giving us the money. Nowadays, we have a different way to see the things. For instance, we have the existence of the Bitcoins and the activities of mining and blockchains among households is impacting in a very hard way our daily life. And also, we have a new asset that is called Bitcoin, and it can be seen in a monetary way. So we have a monetary value for this kind of asset. Another example is the cloud computing. In the past, we have that the enterprises has IT investment in which they are paying IT equipment as an investment of fixed asset, and also they are paying the wages of the staff. Nowadays, we are changing in a very hard way. Now we are paying a cash for renting the services of cloud computing. Now these services are provided by any other enterprise, and now we don't have any kind of investment at all. We can rent these services. So these are activities that we can see as examples of the impact of the digitalization in our daily life. So what are the challenges that the national accounts are facing? First, even though digitalization is pervasive, the current economic standards do not provide much guidance in this regard on how to capture this activity and make it visible for any users. Also, nor it is evident in the economic accounts and tables provided to users. It is amazing how can we see that the current SNA that we are following as the international standard, it's only referring as digital once at least. And in this part, I am showing you what is happening with the GDP. That is the key measurement in national accounts. The GDP in the expenditure approach that we know very well, we don't have any references about any digital activity or any digital expenditure or any digital consumption. But in the second case, in the GDP by industry, neither we have any reference to the digital activities, nor to any kind of, for instance, transport activity that is demanding online or any storage of data, or any e-commerce, nothing at all. So we need to do something more to make it visible in our current estimates. So in this case, we have a challenge because even the pervasive nature of the digitalization, it is very difficult to isolate it, to quantify it, and then to say how much is the impact of these activities. The standard classification do not define digital sector, as was mentioned before, or digital establishments, whose growth and evolution can be compared against other sectors like manufacturing or agriculture or any other. The pace of innovation and the application of digital technologies to existing economic activity make it challenge to ensure a comprehensive coverage of the economic activities that are digitally impacted. While the task of quantifying digitalization is difficult, there is a value in quantifying this. And to better understand what is the evolution that is taking place in this kind of activities. So it has been said before that the GDP can be considered as an adequate measure about the market production. But we have some concerns about this key measure. First, what is happening about the prices and volumes behind the digital products? Are we capturing them in a good way? What are the new forms or intermediation services? In this case, we have the digital intermediation platforms that are taking place in the activities. What is happening about the free and subsidized consumer products? And what is happening also with the consumers as producers of data? Certain assets that are not being currently measured as data, that was mentioned before, or even cross-border flows among countries that is very difficult to get data in this regard. So we have this, in this case, three main concepts about digitalization. First, we have what is digitization. We can have an example of an author that is writing a book that will be only sold digitally. So we are digitization this information in a digital format. And then we have what is digitalization. Digitalization is the use of digital technologies to facilitate this activity. So this ebook can be sold through Amazon, that is a digital intermediary platform, and then it can be read by any user in a tablet. So again, digital. So the digital economic activity, all of this together reflects digitally facilitated economic activity as a whole. So we have many issues that should be considered regarding the digitalization. Through the handbook to measure the digital supply and use tables, we can see that this guideline can be used and is based on three elements. First, we have the digital industries that are those firms that rely highly on or utilize digital technologies to produce goods and services. Also, we have digital transactions. Digital transactions that are facilitated by digital technologies. We can see, for instance, a product that can be digitally ordered or a service that can be digitally delivered. And then we have products that are either digital themselves or that facilitate the production of digital products or digital exchanges. Last year, we conducted in the Statistics Department of the International Monetary Fund an experimental exercise with 5 countries, and we used 3 countries that are already disseminating digital economy estimates. We used as a framework the digital supply and use tables and took the data from these countries direct or indirectly. We used also the economic surveys, and we identified through the supply and use tables the digital products, the digital activities, and the digital industries. In this way, we got these numbers that I am presenting here, And we are making comparisons, for instance, with the United States, with Canada, and with Australia, they are already compiling these estimates in an experimental way. So we can see, for instance, that in some cases, countries like Mexico that are already compiling the e-commerce have a high prominence of the digital economy. We took all these activities, or the part of the activities that are impacted by the digitalization, and we compared them against the total GDP. And we got these ratios. So we can see the different measures or the different sizes of the digital economy obtained in this way. So even in this case, we are encouraging the countries to try to experiment in these estimates, because this is the only way that we can approach this difficult topic. In the updating of the standards, there is a promotion or encouragement to quantify the impact of the digitalization in the economy. We have several points that we need to address. First, meeting a wide range of demands and needs. Also, we are recommending countries to develop a suite of indicators such as digital transaction, products, and industry, and also related to the e-commerce, digitally delivered products, or digital intermediation platforms, expenditures on information, communication technology, and also AI, or cloud computing and data. We are working with the countries. Some of them are approaching us to continue working in this field. But how is the international community responding in this regard? Here has been mentioned the updating of the 2008 SNA to be the 2023. And the conceptual framework robust, we consider that the framework that we are following to compile national accounts is robust, but measurement in some areas may require improvement and new approaches. Digitalization is one of these. Recognize that complementary statistics to bridge gaps between consumer surplus and GDP could be necessary. In response to user demand of data, making the capital revolution more visible, developing guidance that countries can be used to quantify the impact of digitalization. In this case, the Handbook of Digital Supply Unit Tables is a very good tool to follow. The guidance is designed to meet a wide range of demands and needs, and the update of the standards is also addressing the user needs. Here I am presenting the topics that are addressed in the updating of the standards about digital economy. First, we have the issue of the price, the issue of the price and volume measurements of goods and services that is not easy to solve. Also, we have the case of cloud computing, the digital intermediation platforms, the artificial intelligence, recording data, as was mentioned by John, increasing the visibility of digitalization with the tool that I have mentioned before, crypto assets and non-fungible tokens, that is a topic that the IMF is working on also, and free products. And what is doing the IMF in this regard? So in the statistics department, we used to provide technical assistance. This is an activity that is demanding a lot of resources in the statistics department. We are paying too much attention in this regard. And we are implementing a multi-pronged CDS strategy. We are organizing regional workshops. We have organized in Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, and others to come, like in the Middle East. We are providing also technical assistance and training on digital economy or digitalization topics. We are developing a methodology handbook and compilation guides on cryptocurrencies, digital money, fintech, data also, as was mentioned by John with OECD, and coordinate CD with other international organizations, like in this case, UNCTAD. Provide TA also on the use of a new range of non-traditional data sources that can potentially be used to improve estimates of GDP, flash estimates of GDP, or high-frequency indicators. This is an activity that we are supporting too much with a specific program called D4D. And also, because this is like a mainstream in our work, we are developing a tailored implementation approach to needs and limitation of fragile and conflict-affected states. This is an area of work that the IMF is paying too much attention. We are using also new data and new digital platforms for collaborations. For instance, we are transiting to electronic publications. Also, we share common concepts across all statistical domains, not only in national accounts, but also in balance of payments and monetary financial institutions. Also, we are hosting a forum for interaction between compilers and users and peer-to-peer collaboration. And finally, we are developing a compilers hub to facilitate sharing of best practices with an open community. What are the key recommendations that we are giving to member countries? We consider as key ingredients to successful transition to updated standards. First, we are inviting them to be engaged in the global consultation because it is very important to know the opinion, not also from those countries that have important advantages in the statistics, but also with others that are having a lack of data sources. We are developing the revision process. We need to ensure sufficient resource allocation. We need to engage with reporters of data. Also, we need to engage with users of data. And we are attending the requirements of technical assistance that we are receiving in the statistics department. And finally, I want to make here this invitation to every year the statistics department is organizing a statistical forum. In this year, the statistical forum should be hybrid. It will be in person, but also virtual. And the topic of this year is the digital age, digital money. So we will address topics like what is the impact of the digital money in the financial politics and the monetary policy, and also what is the impact in the illegal flows or even other means of payment. So you are cordially invited, and thank you very much for your kind attention.
I think we now have 10 minutes for questions. If we can have a bit of light, would be good. I don't know if there are any questions from the audience. While you're thinking, maybe I can take advantage from my position as chair.
There's a question.
Oh, there's a question. Okay, please. Thanks. I was a bit blinded.
Thank you for really interesting presentations. Given the time limitation, I would have several questions, but I'll only pose one for John, actually. You were mentioning the empirical results about introducing data as an asset into the accounts. That all related to GDP. I was wondering what the service lives were that underlie the estimates, because maybe the effect on net income is bigger than the effect on gross income. I would imagine that the service lives for data are pretty short, and so that could actually play out in that respect.
Thank you very much. Do we have other questions? Yes, there, please. Microphone. Thanks.
Well, thank you for your presentation. Very good presentation, posed very challenging issues also. So, according to the presentation of John, the experience available at this moment that you show in your presentation what is the approach to capture the information to implement the sum of cost methods? Probably the service as the natural way to capture the information because it's very specific. But do you know any example of admin records to use in this matter?
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? If not, yes. There, please. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Many thanks to all the speakers. My question is for Tina. Well, you speak about the importance of prices, right, and the measurements on real terms. Well, I would like to know if you use special prices on goods and services in order to get volume measurements for the digital economy, or you use the non-digital prices on transactions.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you. Thanks for the interesting questions. Anybody else? Gone? If I may add also a question, what are the new challenges which have been posed maybe by higher inflation? I think it follows well from the previous question. And perhaps if there is time, what role does research and development, R&D play in the digital economy? Maybe we could start with John, as people seem to
No, that's fine.
ask you questions.
Microphone's good, that's good. I might leave the high inflation one for some others, but I'll start with a couple of very direct questions. So in regards to service life, Paul makes a really good point. And what's been useful about the empirical work already is that Canada, when they first produced, they should get congratulations for producing first. They had an asset life of 25 years, which, if you ask me personally, I would think is much too long. The Australian Bureau of Statistics, when they produced their estimates, gave a service life of 3 years. And so this is what has been useful, is that countries can start to implement different ideas. And I would encourage people to look at the Australian Bureau of Statistics paper, because they actually showed the difference on net capital stock estimates if they use the 25-year asset life as opposed to the 3-year asset life that they did. Now, the SNA doesn't normally go into that kind of specific detail, saying for cars you need an asset life of 10 years and for houses you need an asset life of 25. And so, but in the initial stages of coming up with data investment, we think that we will need to give some kind of boundaries, because otherwise the estimates of capital stock will be very different across countries. But we're probably unlikely to go as far as saying this is the asset life for capital stock, for data. In regards to the data source by Sebastian, so almost all the work that's done so far has used labour force surveys, maybe complemented with censuses to get wage rates or the amount of people working in specific occupations. So most of it has come with data sources that are already available. Japan has instigated a couple of very small, very specific surveys regarding the amount of data usage for particular occupations, where they say, do you use data 20% of the time? Do you create data X amount of the time? I will say that there has been some very innovative stuff from first the US and then followed on by some colleagues at the OECD regarding using machine learning based on job advertisements, and that this has helped quantify the digital intensity of certain occupations to try and come up with a more systematic approach to estimating how much time different occupations are spent on creating data. And I think, Stephanie, at the beginning, public goods. This one I could speak about for 20 minutes, so it'll be a very short and unfulfilling answer. The initial point, I think, is that the general government or the public sector can certainly create data assets, and that the data asset created by them should be considered within the overall data assets, even if they are publicly available. It somewhat comes to your definition of exactly what is the production produced by the government or non-market production. If we say, because I get asked this question all the time, I deal with statistical officers, putting out GDP is an important part of government's administration. It helps them come up with correct policy approaches. And so the data that is GDP is helping them with this production. And so if it was a private company, we would say, okay, let's capitalise it. Now, because it's freely available, there's a little bit of a twist to it. But generally, freely available R&D is capitalised, and so we think that there will be a similar route to publicly available data being created. But it's not quite as simple as that, but I'll probably just leave it there for now.
Thank you very much. You also had a question, Tina?
Yeah, thank you. The question was about prices and whether we use prices for digital or prices that include non-digital activity as well. And as I mentioned, our statistics come from our supply use tables, which are very detailed. So we have about 5,000 different categories of goods and services that we choose from. And in almost every case, we are using just digital prices that's specific to those digital goods. The one exception is related to retail and wholesale trade, so e-commerce. Unfortunately, we don't have prices specific to e-commerce versus, if you're buying something in stores. That is something that we're interested in looking into. We do have a laundry list of other things, I think, that are coming ahead of that. But that's the one exception where we don't have specific digital prices.
Would Dave and Martha like to comment on your question?
Sure. So you mentioned the high inflation environment. So here I'm going to restate that these are my views, not the views of anybody I work for. But I wasn't sure exactly what you were driving at there. But I mean, so in a sense, the question right now is not why is inflation so high. The question is why isn't it higher, right? With at least in the United States, with unemployment being as low as it is. And so that's related to the digital economy, or it could be, for a variety of reasons. It could be the case that the matching function in the labor market is more efficient because of digital technologies, right? So perhaps the natural rate of unemployment is lower than we think it is. It could be the case that labor productivity has been climbing faster than we think, and we're not catching it because of measurement challenges, in which case the pressure on prices would be consequently lower, although we wouldn't necessarily see it in our official statistics. And of course, like the classic historical parallel here is in the late 90s when Alan Greenspan was convinced that the deployment of personal computers and the rise of the internet and so forth was making businesses more productive, and that we could hold rates lower for longer than was suggested by the policy rule that we were using at the time. Turned out he was right. That's a classic example of where we were looking at the official statistics and treating them as ground truth, but also bringing in other information. So there the statistics become an input into the policy process, but not the only input. And one other thing I'll mention is there was a question for Tina about the prices used in the digital satellite account. Something interesting, and those of you involved in the SNA revision can correct me if I have this wrong, but my understanding from reading the material from the digitalization working group is that the recommendation is going to be for digital access services like the ones I showed on one of my slides, where it was so peculiar that prices weren't falling, right? We've all been watching Netflix a lot more, and we seem to get better and better services for our phones and so on. One approach to measuring those prices that differs from the official US statistics, which do use hedonics, is to take seriously the idea that the volume of consumption that you use from your phone, from streaming services and so on, is a measurement of consumption, right? So the official statistics do use hedonics, but they treat the object of interest as the contract, right? So you pay for a contract with certain characteristics for the month for your cell phone, and you regress the prices of that contract on those characteristics. An alternative approach is to say, okay, you paid X amount for your cell phone this month. You used Y amount of bytes of data, right, to use all your apps and whatnot. So the appropriate quality adjusted price is X over Y, right? And when we did that, and other folks have done that too, some folks in the UK have done that, you get radically different prices falling much faster. In fact, the official ones aren't falling at all. And you might say, okay, well, we don't like unit value indexes. That's a little suspect. But here's a case where it's interesting to use. We're economists. We have models in our heads of how these things are interrelated. So if you look at the Jorgensen capital services equations, there's a relationship between the stock of assets in use in the production of a service and the stream of real service that you're getting from the asset, right? So you look at the cell phone provider, and they have billions and billions of dollars of computers and communications equipment that they use, and basically what you're buying from them is a stream of capital services. So you have to make assumptions about depreciation and tax rates, et cetera, to get from investment to services. But nevertheless, it should be the case that those service prices are falling at a similar rate to the investment prices that you're using when you calculate the capital stock for these companies. And they're just not. But if you do take the approach that I just described, which is essentially a unit value index, you get prices that are much more consistent with that economic relationship. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Martha.
Thank you. I want to add something regarding the prices of the digital products. First, that this is part of the work stream of the digitalization area in the updating of the SNA. And this is specifically a guidance note, and now there's an ongoing work in this regard because the price and volume measure are particularly difficult in this topic, and should be a guidance maybe in the near future. And about the practices in using the prices, it's just that there are not much prices for digital products. We think about the CPI basket. We can understand that nowadays they are not as part of the basket, so it is very difficult to have a specific price in this regard. And in this relation, nowadays the industrial classification of activities, the ISIC, and the central classification of products have been already updated, and they have included the digital industry of products. But now we need to move forward to the classification of by purpose. That is the one that is behind the CPI. So it maybe will take a time. Meanwhile, some strong assumptions that the ones that we are following should be continued taking because we don't have any other good option in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much.